Psychotechnologies
Technologies
live.
live.
Woo!
Yo, how's it going, Daniel?
Going very well. How's it going with you, Elliot?
Good. So we're in an interesting week this week. Um,
Hmm.
we're in the week of Passover, which uh, I know what that is. You know what that is, but it's a Jewish festival of that happens around the Easter time each year, and I don't know, there's the festival, and then there's how do you do it? Like, how does your family do it, or how did you do it growing up? And these are both, and obviously my family did it slightly different to your family. These are very interesting questions. So,
Mhm.
do you want to try and start with maybe what is the festival?
Yeah, so it's the festival of Passover, gets the name because the Jews, and I don't know if this is historical record or just our
I think
indigenous
the
language.
archaeological record is debated, but
Okay.
um, the like according like our book says it, but the archaeology doesn't really affirm so well. But
Yeah.
that's a
So
debate.
there's archaeology, which is a thing, and I'm not an expert on that, but I can share with you like the tenets of our faith and the stories that are oral traditions, as they say. A long time ago, in a land far, far away, the Jews were trapped in the land of Egypt under the evil Pharaoh, and he made us slaves for 210 years. And then all of a sudden, all at once, God did a bunch of cool shit. And then we all just left, wandered the desert for 40 years, and then went to the land of Israel. And that's like the start of our uh, nation state, kind of, I guess, or it
It's
was
funny.
like trying.
So I start when I've had to like I'm surrounded by people who are not Jewish in my life, and so I've had to like explain what the heck we're doing this week, which is usually I just fly under the radar and don't tell people. But this year I'm like, no, I should embrace my heritage and be honest and
Yeah.
share it with people because like whatever. They don't understand anyway. They're not like I think it used to feel like, oh, they're putting me on the spot. I'm a weirdo. I need to like justify my existence. And then I've come to peace with it. I'm like, no, I am the Jewish guy.
Yeah.
I'm the only one.
Yeah.
Let me just tell you what it's like. But when I started Abraham. Abraham had a son Joseph.
Okay.
There's the story of Joseph and his.
No, Abraham had a son Isaac, who had a son Jacob, who had a son Joseph.
Okay, I really clearly a shortcut. Anyway, then you have Joseph in the Technicolor coat, and then
Yeah.
Joseph gets thrown in a pit, and then captured by slave traders, and then taken to Egypt. This is a really shortened version,
Yeah.
where he becomes a dream interpreter and successfully predicts a like bountiful harvest for 7 years, then a drought for 7 years, and he warns the ruler at the time, who listens to him, and they successfully store up food, and so they become quite bountiful. And then Joseph's family comes from the outer areas into Egypt to because Egypt had the food.
Yeah. So they would have been
The
in our
Jews end
tradition, I
up in
think, land of yeah, they would have been living in like modern day Israel, somewhere around
Egypt.
there.
Right. And so then the nation that we talk about as us ends up in the Egypt area, and then that leader dies, and like you said, 210 years later.
Yeah. So they get stuck there, but they were only intending to visit, but then their brother was there, and it was like a whole thing. So then, and not all the tribe members, not all the brothers were there, but so there was 10. Jacob had 12. Jacob, whose name is also Israel, which is what like our people are named after. He had 12 sons. So one of them was Joseph, who went to Israel and became second in command. And then 10 of the sons went to Egypt to go get food, which was like the bulk, and them with their wives, with their wives and their children.
As you did, you always traveled with everyone.
Yeah,
Hey,
like
everyone, jump in the caravan. Let's go, go down the road.
yeah, yeah. I believe we were like somewhat nomadic at the time.
Mhm.
Like we were really settled and then left, even when we were in Israel, or the land of Canaan, as it was known then.
Mhm.
And then so then we went. The bulk of the people went there. Then they were there. They sent messengers to back to Jacob or Israel,
Mhm.
that like it's good here. Like there's stuff happening here. Like you should come. right? Because there's a whole story in politics and stuff of why he ended up showing up, why ended up coming, and then so the rest of the people went to Egypt, but they didn't go there to live. They just went to sojourn, as the English word is, which is to stay for a while,
occupy temporarily.
Yeah,
think of it as
I don't want
like
to say occupy because they were to dwell, yeah, because they weren't occupiers, right? Like they were within the structure of that of Egypt at the time. And so they were just there to live for a little bit, but then shit went south. Joseph wound up, like over time, Joseph wound up dying, and then the new pharaohs came in, and he didn't like him. So he was thinking about the Jews as a fifth column, which is essentially when a fifth column is when you have an army that's like attacking you, and then your people rise up and join the invading army. So to compare to modern day geopolitics, this is what Putin thought or claimed would happen with Ukraine, is that he would go in and then the Ukrainian people would rise up, say that they're Russian, and then the war would be over, which obviously didn't happen.
I like the metaphor of a fifth column. Like a building needs sort of 4 corner columns to hold up the roof, and this is like there's a fifth pillar that's like strong and holding up something that like, oh no, that's a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's what he claims. So then the Jews were in Egypt, and then they were slaves to the Pharaoh, and like that's sort of the start of the Passover. It's called the Seder.
There were rules like throw your boys in the river, like you can't have children, because obviously
it was prophesied that
to become the army if they
so according to like our text, the reason was claimed was because there was a prophecy that a leader would arise from the Jewish people that would take them out, and so they had calculated out to the astrologers had calculated out to a certain date, and so or a certain year or something.
This reminds me of like many of the Greek myths were like Kronos. Is it Kronos? Saturn, which is sort of same. Saturn being told that his son would kill him and take his throne, and so there's the Saturn eating his children.
Yeah,
is the painting, the horrified.
I remember that one from last Psychiatrist. Talked about that. Yeah, like, and then they gave him, and there was another one where like the kid would kill the parents, but then the parents tortured the kids so that he would have good reason to overthrow him, and that the kid wouldn't feel bad.
Pull this up really quick, because Saturn devouring his son is a famous painting, and particularly because the eyes are this horrified look of, oh no, what have I done? Like him knowing he had to eat his son, otherwise his son would surpass him, and then the horrified look, and then there's always these memes that make a good fun of. And they're like, this one, there's many of them, but anyway, Saturn eating his son is quite the archetype. Oh, and the one, love that one. Anyway, that's it's interesting that the chronicle of the prophecy that you describe comes in other cultures. But as it happens,
shared a lot of stuff.
In our story, the origin story of Moses is that his mother put him in a basket and floated him down the river, and then he was picked up by royalty. So Moses gets this
by Pharaoh's daughter, actually.
Right. But so Moses gets this free pass of born of the people but raised as royalty, which is one of those convenient archetypes, right? You can't just be the royalty that decided, all right, I'm gonna pick up these slave tribes and walk with them. You have to actually be of the people, which makes it a very convenient origin story,
We have that today as well, though, actually, which is crazy interesting. Elizabeth Warren is like a really good example of that, where I think it's Elizabeth Warren, she's the one that's claiming that she's got native ancestry, but she grows up within the white or dominant culture, or however you want to say that. and she rises through power, and like she has a large claim to things because she's from the people.
It's really funny. Like in the movie A Knight's Tale, which is a old Heath Ledger movie, they do it the other way around. Where the main character is a of the people, lived of the people, and then the ordinary folk were not allowed to join the jousting tournaments, and he's like faked his origins and joined the jousting tournaments, and he was winning, and then someone found out, and then he was winning so well that the royalty at the time decided to authenticate his lineage through some unique back chain that they narrativize in order to give him the place in the tournament that he was really good at winning anyway.
Yeah.
In order
fabricating
the crowd would go wild for him, sort of things. Fabricated claims, yeah. So the phrase
or not like controversial, not taking a side here, but yeah.
There's this game called Crusader Kings.
Yeah, Crusader Kings. Yeah, that's
exactly. You sort of like play different continental kings of like the 500 to 1500 sort of era across Europe, I think. And one of the things you can do when you get bored is fabricate claims to the lands of your neighbors. Like my grandfather's uncle's brother actually.
We found some ancient documents that show this is actually part of our land.
That's actually our land that you're living on. And then you can like go invade your neighbors. It's all part of the game.
Yeah. Gives you casus belli.
Right. So but that's in the other direction, right? Fabricating royalty claims instead of fabricating origin story in among the peoples.
Yeah.
But so we do it both ways. But that's super interesting that we have that in our story. And then obviously Moses would have been an educated human because he was raised under royalty. Probably noticed that the system was a bit rubbish for the underdogs over there, and went off into the desert and talked to the burning bush, talked to God in the burning bush.
Well, yeah. There's actually a story there before that. He was around, and then he saw an Egyptian person beating a Jewish person, and then he killed that person. He killed the aggressor, the oppressor.
Oh, and then he ran away or something, right? Because he was caught for this. Yeah,
and then someone caught him. It's like a little bit more, like all these stories are simplified because obviously it's a little more detailed, but just to simplify, so he got caught, and then so then he ran away to the desert, and he spoke to the burning bush, and he met another nomad who had a bunch of daughters, and he married one of them. And he ran away to the desert. He hung out with the nomads, then he spoke to the burning bush. It was this bush that burned, but the fire didn't consume the bush. So I don't know what that is, but I feel like psychedelics have insight.
Did you wander into the desert and eat some weird cactus and start seeing fire that wasn't fire?
Yeah.
Was it just really damn hot, and so it looked like it was smoking but wasn't burning?
Like the shimmering from the heat. Yeah.
Don't know. Anyway, that happened.
Yeah. But it was like, and then God spoke to him from that.
Through the burning bush.
Yeah, and as per the Jewish tradition, he's like, no, why should it be me? I'm not worthy. And then, he's arguing with God for a week. And then goes back.
Imagine like setting up a debate table with a burning bush and going like, really though, why me?
Yeah.
I think we should talk about this.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very much like the Jewish thing. Like God tells you to do something and you start arguing with them.
That's Jonah's story. God said to Jonah.
Yeah, Jonah did the same thing.
He's like, no.
Jonah, you can't not do it, but like you can talk back, but you can't like run away. Like Jonah ran away. That's why he got eaten by the whale.
Happened later as well that Moses argued with God and Moses hit the rock in the desert.
Yeah, Moses hit the rock, and that was considered a sin because he got frustrated.
Yeah.
But that's later when they're in the desert.
Even like Adam in the Garden of Eden, they ate the tree of life. They're like,
Yeah, that's also
like God, you can't see. Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, that was a mistake. You shouldn't have done that.
There's an interesting moral here of like, stop trying to double cross God or something.
Yeah.
Like if it didn't work the first couple of generations, why would it work this time?
Yeah. yeah, like you can talk and you can dialogue with God, but you don't, like, there's a very fine line. We have this also, like, growing up, there's like a very fine line between dialoguing and like,
Trying to get the better of or something.
yeah, or like fighting or like degrading, right? Like, so like if God's telling you stuff, you're allowed to like converse with him, but you can't like say no, and then you can't not do it. That's bad. But anyway, so he goes down there, all that stuff. He comes back, and then he does. He's like, Pharaoh, let my people go.
Mhm.
And Pharaoh's like, no. And so he performs a bunch of miracles. He says, I'm from God. God told me to take up the people. Performs a bunch of miracles. God's like, Pharaoh's like, no. My magicians can also do magic tricks.
Mhm.
And then he's like, okay, well then we're gonna just have to do some plagues. And so they did 10 plagues. He did a plague, and then he's like, let my people go. Pharaoh's like, no. He's like, we'll do the next one. And so finally at the end, the 10th one, God, it's like killing the firstborn. So God goes around and kills all the firstborn. So what the Jews did is that they took lamb's blood and they put it across their doorposts.
Instructed to slaughter a lamb, put the blood over your doorpost, and the angel of death shall pass over your house.
Yeah.
And anyone who hasn't, the angel of death will visit.
Well, it was God, technically. It was God that was visiting. Not, and it's very clear in the
My God, not an angel, but in fact, will
yeah,
come
yeah,
seek the lives of. Anyway, yep.
Yeah. So God is going around killing everyone, and there's significance with the lamb and the blood, because I think the lamb was considered kind of holy by the
They have
Egyptians.
a lamb god. I think Egypt has a lamb god.
Yeah. So there's a whole thing there where the Jews are just being brazen about our God is going to take us out of bondage.
Mm-hmm.
And then and then like, so then all the firstborn start dying, and then Pharaoh b'pajama be'emsa layla, that's how we say it. So the Pharaoh came out in the middle of the night. It's like midnight, and he's like asleep, and he's the joke is that he's in his pajamas to go come out and say, like, Moses, take your people and get the hell out of here. And then so like, it's the middle of the night, and then we all had to leave. We didn't have enough time to bake bread and rise it for the journey, so we just quickly made some stuff real quick with flour. Mm-hmm. And then you get and didn't have time to rise, so that's unleavened bread, which is matzah.
So one of the festival food is called matzah, and it's a flat bread, dry cracker thing, because the story goes, Jews left with the dough and they baked it on their backs in the desert.
Yeah.
And so we eat the unleavened bread for a week, 8 days.
Yeah, so we don't eat any unleavened bread any unleavened bread. So like, if flour and water come in contact, it has to be cooked within 18 minutes, or else you can't eat it.
Strict provisions. We really like our rules. Judaism.
Yeah. Strong on the and because Jews are crazy around this holiday, so anything that may have touched bread or thought about bread, or not really thought about it, but like touched bread, or may look like bread, or may have gotten mixed up with bread.
Or it looks like grains. So
so there's like a bunch of flour that looks like wheat flour, that you don't, a lot of, like, it depends on which sects, like the Ashkenazi Jews, they won't eat a lot of, like, they won't eat like beans or peas or lentils or things like that. So,
and then the Sephardi's will eat rice, and we think they're mad, but
rice,
that's part of the tradition too.
Yeah, so then it's like very different.
Not Jews if there isn't some infighting somewhere about how we should do it or what we should do.
It's that's how you know it's like Jewish thing, if they're like disagreements.
Yeah.
Everyone agrees on a thing. It's like there's only like a couple things that all the Jews agree on, and then mostly it's like, oh, we do it this way, we do it that way.
Right. So Passover miracle, the matzah, and the third one is the maror, which is part of the Seder story is the need to explain specifically 3 things, and it's not just explain 3 things. We need to explain that we need to explain 3 things as well.
Yeah.
So the various provisions and why we need to explain the three things is also part of the explanation.
Yeah, and they build the tradition and the what's the English word, like what would we call Seder, like the ritual, the night long.
I know it is
ritual
translated
experience.
as the order, like the order of the meal.
Yeah, that's a literal translation, but I feel like it doesn't. I feel like
it doesn't
like
really
non-Jews don't like
it's
that. Doesn't
maybe
make
the
any sense.
procedure,
Yeah, there's a procedure
the
with lots of
procession.
yeah.
Very, very much rule bound. We're really getting stuck into the rule bound nature of Judaism that it says do.
Yeah,
This one's quite a strict one if you follow it.
yeah. This is the strictest one, I think. So it's everyone goes crazy around these times.
Last year was quite difficult during Corona because supermarkets were having difficulty getting food supplies on top of only certain things are permissible. And so everything was just a little bit trickier. This year was eased up a bit, except Australia had a bunch of floods and it was the abattoir that usually gets used for kosher meat just outside of my city shut down because it got flooded. And so there was this extra level of drama that they had to like bring meat up from another city. And because extra provision, extra difficulty, it's difficult enough in the first place. There's like a very small web of trust in Judaism around what is acceptable. And it's kept that way deliberately. Like you can't scale, you can't.
Well, everything needs to be watched by like a rabbi who's like
someone religious enough.
Stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can't. The thing is, because like back in the day, it was a lot easier when you grew up in a village or something, and then you had a local rabbi, and everybody trusted him. So he was the guy that slaughtered. I think my wife's father or grandfather used to be the guy that would slaughter the animals and make sure that they're kosher. But nowadays, like we get food from like who knows where, and so like nobody knows, nobody knows each other. So to like create that network of trust, it's a lot more difficult. There's a whole thing there. That I think that would be like very interesting to people to like
another like side conversation of
about modern stuff, but
right.
Yeah.
Passover stuff. So for the first evening, and of course Judaism has the 24-hour day doesn't run from midnight to midnight. It runs from the evening to the evening, or like sunset to sunset.
Yeah.
So the festival starts the evening of the day before the like day, and then runs. So on the day of, my family went to synagogue in the morning, but on the evening before, there's this order, this Seder. You run through the order of the meal, and so there's a very specific book. And the way we do it, and this is the interesting part, right? How I do it versus how you do it. The way so I went to my parents' house. We had 20 people for dinner, and then we did it a second time on the second night. Anywhere outside of Israel does 2 nights of the festival. At Israel, they only do 1. In any case, so we run through the sequence of the meal, telling the story, reading. So everyone has a copy of the book. We go around the table. Each person reads a paragraph, and occasionally there are paragraphs that have tunes to them, so we sing them. But in general, we go like, okay, would you like to read the next paragraph? And then occasionally we stop and talk about extra details of the provisions or extra cool facts that we want to share. And the fun part about this is like we had someone from who isn't in our family at our table, and they were like, these are some of the things we talk about at our Seder. The extra provisions. And like my whole family,
everybody's sharing.
I usually say, at this point this bit happens, at this point that bit happens.
Everybody shares and they expand on the story and share things that they've heard or that they've read. It's also interesting because the way we do it, and I think a lot of people do it this way, is that they'll read it in whatever language they want. So
we swap paragraph to paragraph. We are. It feels like we're moving more towards the English because you need to be able to read Hebrew to read the Hebrew. But
I'm decent at like reading like normal Hebrew, but like when it gets to like Aramaic, and like some of the Hebrew is just weird. Like and
I
it's a lot
also
of
like I'm torn on this because on the one hand, Hebrew is the authentic language and saying it in Hebrew is the authentic thing. And on the other hand, I can read it, but I don't know what I'm like. I can pronounce it, but I cannot. It's like how you can
you don't
read.
understand.
I can read Latin and I just don't know what it means because I can pronounce the words and sound out the sounds. So
Yeah.
I read it, but I don't understand. And so it feels a little bit pointless. On the one hand, like the mysterious religious language feels like highly spiritual. And on the other hand, entirely pointless. It's like, am I reading a poem? Am I reading like he said, she said? Like what the heck am I reading? And so I kind of am leaning towards the English.
Mm. Yeah, I do like because like we have the Hebrew and the English at the same time. So sometimes if someone's reading Hebrew, I might follow along in English. But so some of the stuff for me, I think is like I kind of feel out what I'm reading.
Right. I'm also like I think I was raised in a culture that was like spirituality is like locked up and behind the religion, and like the religious structure has access to spirit and you don't personally have. And so then since then I roundabout hung out in Buddhism where it's like direct experience. What are you noticing? What are you perceiving in order to access your spirit personally? And so I kind of like you read it in English, it's meant to be poetic, it's meant to be meaningful. And then and that way you can get like even reading an archaic translation isn't accurate. Like it should be these words are the direct link that you have to spirituality. And so I kind of like that a bit better, even though it may make it difficult. Like if you just tell everyone anything, the words that you read are the access to spirit, then you universalize rather than democratize. And so you might end up with many more disagreements about what the spirit is and what the spirit means, because anyone can access spirit. But, you know.
Yeah. So those are just different ways of doing.
Right. So there's in my family we read through the story and then we get about an hour or two of reading story, talking about it like paragraph by paragraph, and then we have the meal, and then there's some after meal. There's grace after meals. So Christianity has a grace before meals. Judaism has an after meal.
There's a before and after.
Yeah, we have a short before, but a longer after, followed by some songs that have a bunch of symbolism in them. And that's how we do it. But I wanted to ask how did you do this year? Like what?
Oh, my Seders. Yeah, so it was fun. So I did the first night at my mom's and we did it like how we were just talking about. And like that was really nice. And my favorite part was because last episode we were talking about like summoning spirits, and then it had in mid-episode it occurred to me that Jews also summon spirits, and I didn't realize this. And we do it on Passover,
right?
And Passover was coming up, so I was like stoked to do that. So that was, I think, my favorite part of the Seder is when we had the cup of Elijah with the grape juice in it. And then we summoned Elijah and went to go speak, opened the door and spoke to him. And it was like this drunken rant that you say. That one. And
like, did you make, if you summoned, did you like make a salt circle and like a?
No, so that's like the Christian way. Where I wanted to do, okay, everybody hold hands and we're gonna like
the Ouija board style.
Yeah, but then my mom very gently reminded me that that is not our religion; it's a different religion, and we have a different way of doing it.
Right. We just we pour the cup, we open the door.
Yeah.
Is this an insult to my religion?
Yeah. No, it was a good point. But I felt like they weren't like in the vibes of that and stuff. They were like fighting those, so I had to like do something to just kind of get us all on the same page, and then we did it. And then my wife started singing. There's a song that you usually sing because Elijah actually visits more often than just Passover. He also usually visits for relief for the Havdalah, which is the ritual that separates the Sabbath from the weekday at the end of the Sabbath. And so there's the song that you sing. And so she sang that, and then we all sang that together, even though it like shifted the vibes. And so that was super fun.
Can you
And then this. Hmm?
can you give some description of who Elijah is?
Yeah, so Elijah is, I can actually do this. So Moses' brother, so when Moses was arguing with God, eventually, because Moses had a speech impediment actually, which was really interesting, and from like an injury when he was a baby, which is like a whole cool story as well. But so he has his brother, and so he hangs out with his brother a lot, who's Aaron, who later becomes Aaron the high priest, and his son or grandson.
Oh, I didn't know there was a family connection there. Interesting.
Yeah, Eliyahu. He's sorry, the name escapes me right now. Sorry, the name escapes me now because I'm on the point. But one of his son's son is like this guy, and then he's like kind of so like it's rumored that Elijah. Shit, I forgot the guy's name, so this is gonna sound stupid. Let me just sorry, I need to re-get myself. Mm-hmm. So he has a so Elijah is like this like kind of like mystical guy that is he appears in like prophets. So he does this whole.
When you say prophets, you mean the book of prophets?
The book of prophets. Sorry.
The books of prophets. I'm not amazingly good at the structure. I know we have the Torah, the main Bible.
Yeah, so it's the 5 books of Moses, and then after that is the book of prophets, and then after that is book of Kesuvim. Oh well, yeah. So there's the book of prophets, but then that's within a section, like another thing called called prophets. Sorry, there's the book of there's the book of prophets, but then there's the whole section, like the way our canon books are set up is you've got the Torah, which is 5 books of Moses. You've got Nevi'im, which is prophets, which includes the book of prophets and kings and all those stories. And then there's another one after is Kesuvim, which is like writings. I don't actually know what the translation is. Mm-hmm. And so like he's like a big character there. So he does a lot of duels. He does a lot of religious duels with people. So he'll do like sacrificing to God, where they have like build altars and this and that. It's like he's like a crazy story guy that does crazy. He's like one of the prophets that goes on crazy adventures that's documented. And also he's like at the end of his life, it's tradition that he went to heaven in a chariot, like he didn't die.
That reminds me a lot like Muhammad, who is also rumored to have ridden up to heaven.
Yeah, it's kind of the same story, but ours came first.
Well, like the point I'm making is that many various religions sort of steal the narrative from each other.
Yeah.
Or like, you know, it even was it some of Jesus's story sounds a bit like was it Jesus? It's something like maybe it was Hercules' origin story comes from an earlier myth. Or like they're all sort of woven in. Little bits of the narratives are woven in together.
Yeah, and this is not to disparage like these people's religions, other religions. It's more like just sort of how stories work and things like that. And like even nowadays, like even like our own political narratives and stuff, like there's like if you move into this mindset of like this sort of, I guess, archaeological or sociological kind of mind or whatever we're doing, you could also describe our modern day stories or myths as through those lines as well.
Right.
So this is sort of just human things. And then so he went on all these adventures, and so he's like kind of like I always describe him as like the Jewish Santa Claus, where he just like shows up magically throughout random times. He also shows up during circumcisions, so he's kind of like, he's not an angel, but like kind of like
he's a visitor.
Yeah, he's like a visitor that comes. And so yeah, he's fun. It's good times. Why are we here? I forgot what we're talking about this.
Right. So he's a prophet. He's a visitor. he's
Yeah.
he's also the going
He's
to
like he's also a herald as well. So like before the Messiah is going to come, he's going to
right.
he's going to
That's what I was about to say. Represent the
um,
coming of the Messiah. His
yeah.
return
And
will be the coming of the Messiah.
yeah, and he also does a lot of the stories, like if you have ancient stories from back in the shtetls, which would have been like Europe in, I don't know, 16 to 1800s or something. There's a lot of stories where like a Jew will go somewhere and they'll meet a stranger, and the stranger does all these things happen. The stranger comes out of nowhere, and they say, "Oh, must have been Elijah the prophet." Um,
It's also like I kind of like that for the way that strangers can sort of be angels or like messengers of God, because it invites you to treat strangers well, as opposed to strangers as dark and shadowy that you shouldn't trust. You should treat them as like the heralders of good things and angels from God who will like give you kind messages. And
well, they might be like, not all strangers are like that, but
right,
like,
that you should anticipate that they might be good news.
Yeah, like when you meet a stranger, like you don't know, is this Elijah in disguise?
Right. Like,
And so you got to treat him a certain way.
Was it Isaac? Isaac wrestled with an angel.
Yeah.
That was again a stranger. Even Abraham met angels on the road. Like, he had his tent that opened in 4 directions, and there were angels that came to visit him that were strangers. Like,
yeah. So yeah, no. So it was Abraham that had
Abraham.
had the stranger. So like one of the stories of Abraham, like was sort of like a fundamental story that like really demonstrates his personality. And actually, this is like a real fundamental story to who Abraham is that he was this guy and he lived in like the desert. And so we had this tent that had 4 walls, 4 doors, and so strangers from any directions could come in. And so he used to just invite strangers into his home and feed them and wash their feet and all that kind of stuff.
Washing someone's feet is a great kindness, especially in the desert when shoes were not a thing. And
I honestly, I don't really get the washing feet one because we never do that, but it is super.
It's also it's interesting because other religions have like touching the feet of the guru is a powerful. Well, so touching the feet of the guru is proposed to have a direct transmission to divinity, and so if you touch the feet, you like channel the conduit of God, like also through you to the ground, sort of.
I know there's another one like Jesus would wash the feet of his disciples, and then he said, "Just as I'm washing your feet, and you wash my feet, like this is how."
Right, which is the same. I think that washing someone's feet is kind of like a lowly job, and so you would only wash someone's feet if they were royalty.
Right, if they had like higher status.
So to treat a stranger as royalty would be like a big deal, that you make them into quite an honored of the other.
Yeah, so that was like a huge thing. So then when those strangers came in and he did all that for them, they later revealed themselves to be angels, and they came with a message that a couple messages. One is that you will have children, which in our stories, both he and his wife were infertile. And so that was like a huge deal. And then secondly, they changed his name his name actually wasn't Abraham, it was Abram. And so Abram had this whole destiny right within the stars and all this stuff. And so when they changed his name, they put an extra letter in his name. He was no longer Abram, he became Abraham. And Abraham had a completely different destiny, which was to be the first, let's say the first member of.
Interesting the way we have the like
to be the father of nations.
Letters, and like changing the name of the person will change their destiny in that way. Yeah.
So Abraham got his name changed, and then also Jacob, which was the leader of like the head of he got his name changed to Israel, which is like where we take our name from. So
right.
Right. So, we also do that nowadays. Actually, if somebody's really sick, we'll change their name. Like we'll give them an extra name, and then that's
in that like the old name can die and the new name can live. sort of.
Yeah, like to change the destiny. Or maybe that name was destined for a certain thing, but now you have different names, so you have a different destiny. Because Jews, this is really cool, because Jews kind of believe in we believe in astrology, I guess, like at least traditionally, but we don't believe that we're subject to it necessarily.
Right.
Because we have a covenant with God and we engage in that way.
I'm like, as I hear you say this, I'm thinking, wait, I did know this, but I think of Judaism as a very structural, rule-bound, organized religion. But now that you mention it, oh yeah, there is this like the thing with the names and thing with symbols, which is very much pre-structural, very like the like you say, the astrology stuff is very much before orderliness, structuraliness. You kind of look at the stars and follow your luck. Then when you get to our like very we live in a very square society as a foundation of like healthy society. We're going into like chaotic territory now as we get the postmodernisms and the post-postmodernisms and like the integration of all these other things. But it feels like the foundation of our society is very square. They're like, do your job, 9 to 5, don't break the law, be a good person, simple structure, solid structure. But Judaism has this branch like the astrology. It has obviously Kabbalah, this mystical. It has a lot of these symbolic stuff in there if you look deep enough.
Yeah, it's really interesting because there is this like Judaism that kind of like, let's say, existed pre-Second Temple. And then there's like the Judaism that existed post Second Temple destruction.
Yes.
And they're very different. At least like functionally and stuff, but which does make a lot of sense in the sense that like before the distraction, like let's say like while the Jews were living in Israel, they had a homeland and things like that. And destruction of Second Temple, like we no longer were in control of our homeland, and so we became exiles and call it galus, which is like I think that's exile. Or like diaspora, I think is another word.
Yeah.
And so like nowadays, like the Jews we consider ourselves living in diaspora, even if we're living in Israel. Not all the Jews are like that, but most of them are, even the Israel. And that's a lot of what the Passover is about. It's about acknowledging that we were once slaves and then we were free, and that now we're in Galus, next year in Jerusalem.
Right. This is one of the things said in the order is the phrase "next year in Jerusalem." And
that's a big line, is like knowing that, and like a lot of the Passover is like keeping in mind the different ways of redemption, and that we can still we will still be redeemed.
So I was talking to someone this week, and they said that they offered that one way to look at these stories is not that they happened like obviously there's a historic something happened, something got written down, whether it's the same thing, whatever, but to not think of them as happening in the past, but to think of them as still happening right now. And that's a kind of cool idea because for one, there's a line and this is very important through the Passover Seder, that you should say to your children, as I went out of Egypt.
Yeah.
Like that's the line is explicitly, and you should say to your children. And
right.
like
I gotta go now. My wife needs the computer, sorry.
You could restart the stream on your computer.
My computer, okay, goodbye. Well, I'll send you a message.
All right. Well, I'll finish, and you should tell your children, right? So the line is not just tell your children. It's that during Seder, we say the phrase, and you should tell your children. And like the children also hear the phrase, and you should tell your children that as I went out of Egypt, that as if I too was leaving Egypt on the walk when everyone else left Egypt, which is kind of an incredible way to bring the tradition alive. Like, it's not just that it happened in the history and we read the history books, it's that we have them like right now. Which is, when I was a kid, it was just an interesting story, an interesting quip, say, and I went out of Egypt. And now, as I've like come the long way around the mountain of like understanding religion and getting in touch with like why we might want to do it, and like trying to get myself at home here, to suddenly attempting to live the tradition of personally saying the phrase, as I went out of Egypt, is super interesting. Like what is it like? What are they trying to teach us, or what are they trying to get us to learn when we repeat the phrase, as I went out of Egypt? Yeah, I find it super interesting.
That's a great question. Yeah. So yeah, this is also a big part of the situation that it's not like these rituals are not history lessons. They're not, oh, and then there were these people and they did this thing and stuff happened. This is life now.
Right.
Like we are these people, and in every generation, people try to kill us. Right? Like this is like a part of Seder.
I don't like that we say that, because I wonder if that sets us up for sort of trouble.
I think it's true, and I 100% think that is actually really important.
Like I don't feel thrilled writing into the religion, every generation I'm gonna get attacked. Like, can't they just write it like every generation will be successful or something? And then
well, they do have that, like every generation.
And every generation will come out on top.
Every generation, the baby spit up on us.
Right. So in trying to bring the Passover Seder or the previous story to the personal, we get to ask the question, like, in what ways are we fleeing Egypt and fleeing and like another version is here, is like, in what ways are we falling out of Eden right now, and in what ways are we receiving the 10 Commandments right now as well, on the like lifetime scale, on the personal level, and then on the like moment to moment level of our lives. Like, one day you might be walking down the street and you may be like, you may be walking through a crowd of people, and suddenly the crowd will part, and you'll go like, was this a sea parting moment? Am I doing the like sea parting moment of my life?
It's like when Moses parted this thing.
Right. Or like, you'll have a period in life where you'll have the equivalent of feeling like there are 10 plagues around. Or you'll have a moment in your life where you'll think you're talking to a burning bush. Like, the more that we can find those moments and apply it to our own lives, the better. The more we can feel connected to the biblical story, the more that we can integrate those lessons into our lives and feel, well, for me, it's deeply connected to my roots, because my roots are Jewish roots.
Yeah, and it's that's the thing, is like there is like these roots and like you're saying, but like more when you're saying, like, seeing it in your everyday life, it's not, again, it's not like, oh, this is where I came from. This is where I am, right? I am reliving these stories in my lifetimes, and it's one of these things, like it actually like addresses one of these problems that are really difficult, is like intergenerational cycles. So like when you see cycles throughout your life, like you're able to, the sun goes up, comes down, or, you do that every day, you get used to it, you know how it works. But when you have things that are like, no, every couple generations this thing happens, it becomes like, how do you track that, right? Like it's important, but it becomes very difficult to live. And so like I think this is a big part of like solving those problems, or at least dealing with them. I don't know that we've actually solved the problem, but like, yeah, each generation, like, did you like, it's not each generation, but it's, you know, every couple of generations really. People do try to kill the Jews. And you got to remember that, because like this has been going on since the Jews left Egypt like 3,000 years ago or something. And so just because we have modern technology doesn't make it less.
So you say that there's cycles in each generation, but one way I think about that is that there's a spiritual path, and there's a spiritual path not just for generations but for individuals. Everyone has to go on the spiritual path. Buddhism calls it the recognition of impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and no self. But
Right.
like everyone, it's going to remain relevant while we need to keep sorting out our understanding of what suffering is.
Yeah, well, the suffering thing
Like
is,
every new consciousness needs to come into that understanding and that self-awareness and that like that journey. And that's why impressively religious structures will remain relevant.
yeah, exactly. Like every generation has to, like each new person that's born, they don't understand the history of the world that came before them. And, you know, like not their fault, like it's also me, right? Like everyone is like this. And, you know, you got to learn that stuff. And, you know, you could look at it, yeah, like I think like the more Buddhist side looks at it from, you're a person and you suffer, so here's all these things. But then we're also looking at it from the parenting side. So like the Seder is a big part of like passing on that tradition of, hey, remember this time that we were in Egypt, like let me tell you this story. And we're going to do it every single year so that we never forget. And even if we're wise and even if we're knowledgeable and if we know all the things, you got to still do it, because that's the life. That's the lifeblood of the religion and the culture. And without that, it's Vervaeke's always talking about like domicide. And it's really, and he's saying like in ancient Greek times and all that stuff, like there was all this domicide throughout history where for those that haven't heard this, it's people had this home and they had this way of being in this culture, and then that got destroyed through either colonizing or modernizing or however. And like the Jews, they lost, like we've lost our land, although we have it back now, kind of. That's the whole thing I don't want to get into. But, you know, like, let's say up in before the formation of State of Israel, we lost our land, but we didn't lose our culture, and so we didn't lose our homes in a way. We were able to have homes even if we weren't in permanence and government and all that stuff. And that's interesting stuff.
Yeah. Is there any, so I mentioned you should tell your children. Do you want to talk about the Afikoman? This is such a weird, so one of the elements of the order of the meal is this thing called the Afikoman. Do you want to describe?
Yeah, so the Afikoman is we have three matzahs. So the matzahs are the unleavened bread. It's the same, it's like a flatbread, as you called it, is a good description. And so what we do is there's three of them, and then at the beginning of the meal you take one of them, you break them in half, and you hide it later, like you put it away for later. So you put it somewhere where people aren't going to find it.
Right. You literally hide it. In my family, when I was younger, we'd sort of send the kids on a treasure hunt to find the thing.
Yeah, so you'd find it. So the way like the kind of lore is. Sorry, I'm really excited because he's been like really babbling and making noises on me.
Yeah, he sounds way more talkative. This is I guess is this his first Seder that you've just taken him through?
Yeah. He wasn't really at the Seders because he went to sleep a little bit early. He was there for a little bit, but not for very long.
Right. And so this is his first, like, the kid has the youngest child at a Seder table has a special section. Like I was describing, each person reads a paragraph, and there's this one song that is more like questions. It's more like why do we do the four questions? Why do we do this thing on the night? Why do we eat this? Why do we There's 4 questions.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
it's
technically it's 1 question, 4 answers, but we call it the 4 questions.
right. And what we do is we get the youngest kid, or I guess in my family now, see, I'm the youngest of my generation and my dad's the youngest of his. And like, so, and my sister has kids, and so the youngest of her kids who's able to speak. We all sort of get all the kids to do it, but I remember being on the spot because I was the youngest for years. I was the youngest in my extended family of like 20 to 30 people, like my uncles, their kids. I was the youngest, and so I was like, you need to stand up and sing. It was terrifying. And then like I would sort of sing the first verse, and then the rest of the kids, anyone under the ages of about 15 would sing, and then the adults would sort of sing along gently in the background.
Yeah, that one is that stuff is always fun.
Tricky, but it felt like super awkward as a kid to sing this song or to be put on the spot for that song. But yeah, so that's him. He's joining you for the Seder. You get to say to him, as I went out of Egypt.
Yeah, and that's like but wait, the Afikoman, so you're saying, so you save it for dessert essentially, like it's for after. So then the person hides it somewhere, and then the kids go and find it, and then they rehide it. And so what happens is you get to the end, you're like, okay, let's finish up. Let's get the Afikoman. The guy goes to get the Afikoman. It's not there.
Really? Wow. Yeah. We didn't do the rehiding. We just did the like find it once.
But, no, so
family, slightly different tradition. Yep.
Yeah. So so at the end of the day, the kids like hold it for ransom.
Yes.
So like very like the kids
this
are like,
I want a pony moment.
Yeah, you want to finish, you want to go to bed, but we're kids, so we're still up and excited. And we're not finishing until you give us something.
Get us a pony, or like I want swimming lessons, or I want whatever.
Yeah, whatever. So then every year traditional. Yeah, the kids would then ransom it, and the parents would get them a gift beforehand, and then they would exchange it
beforehand. I didn't know about beforehand.
Or promises or something.
Yeah, promises. I'm familiar with the promises. Like the kid asks for the pony, and the parents are like, yeah, and then I don't know if
it depends on how on top of it the parents are.
Well, it depends on if the parents actually want you to have a pony as well.
Yeah. Like there's a negotiation usually, and then it's whatever the parents have previously decided.
Right. Parents have a lot of power in parent-child relationship, so maybe the parents say no. But anyway, it's up for negotiation and ransoming anyway.
Yeah, so it's like symbolic in the sense that like, because you really want you need the next generation to be involved. This is like a thing that Christians are always complaining about, of like church is boring, and like that's not just true of Christians, right? That's true of all religions.
It's interesting how many provisions we have built in here, like the find the Afikoman and the sing the song and the like that like get the kids into the tradition. There's this section of the 4 sons: the wise son, the wicked son, the simple son, and the son that is doesn't know how to ask. He's too young.
You. He doesn't know how to ask any questions yet.
Right. And that's like, again, it's all like this whole process is about telling your children and involving the children. And I know families that like act out the plagues. Someone showed me they had like a face mask that was for darkness. There's a plague of darkness. And so they all put on face masks for like, 30 seconds or whatever.
Yeah, they do this a lot in the schools. Like the kids will do stuff. So like
draw pictures of frogs, because one of the plagues was frogs.
Yeah. So they'll always do something for the Seder, and then they'll show it off like, oh, this was like this, and it's like always different, right? Because you're trying to make it interesting. And like some of the stuff is the same every year, but some of the stuff switches.
Looking for a new angle on the like. We've been repeating this damn ceremony for hundreds and hundreds of years.
That's right.
We're looking for something that to keep it novel and to share it with the new generation. Like even I've done it, I'm 30 now, 30 is my life sort of thing. Not that I remember the first couple because I was tiny, but it's just you do it when you're 8 and then you read them again when you're 10. 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 15, 18, like 22, I'm still reading the same book. Something is needed to make it like deeper or so meaningful.
More exciting.
Yeah.
I remember like when I was teenager, like it's so interesting how it changes all the time. Because like when I was a kid, it was like, actually when I was a kid, it was like learning it for the first time. It's like, oh, what's going on here? But then, you know, as you get older, it's like, okay, I've already done this a million times, like 10 times already, whatever. And you get like more complex books and like putting things together. And then as like now I'm a parent, it's the responsibilities actually shifted. So I used to be the one receiving the knowledge, but now I'm the one transmitting the knowledge.
Oh, that's terrifying. Don't tell me that. That's like, oh my God, I don't know the knowledge enough to transmit it. Like, terrifying.
Yeah, so you gotta learn, you gotta get on that shit, right?
I'm gonna go read a bunch of stuff so that I can share it.
Yeah, and to me, like the thing I'm more interested in now is like the vibes, or I guess like the psychotech side of it, or like let's say the pragmatic, practical interactions and psychotech side of it, because like a lot of the knowledge is already written down. So, you know, we are the Jewish nation. Like not everyone has to know everything all at once, but you do want to know, like, because like we call it the Masorah, which is like the oral tradition. And like what's some of the things? Yeah, so he's got like, he's going to get that from me. He's not going to get every detail and every piece of knowledge, but just like the gist of it and like what's important, right? Like you get that from your parents.
Right. I have an interesting story that I want to share. So this comes from my grandmother, she's passed away. She passed away when she was like 96, 97, about 4 years ago or so. And this is when I was very young, we would have a Seder table. And now the book for the Seder, each paragraph is sort of laid out identically with a slightly different translation from Hebrew to English. They might use different words. Different books, like if it was written in the 50s, it's going to have a different translation to if it was written in the 90s, translated in the 90s.
Or who's doing the translation, they pick different words.
Right. Like actually, we didn't meant sojourn, we meant dwell. We didn't meant dwell, we meant hang out. Like they went down to Egypt to like hang.
Yeah, I do find the Seders are more like the information is much more accurate. Oh, I realized your middle story. But like when you get like a bunch of different people from different backgrounds with different different translations, then you can kind of triangulate like what is the thing trying to transmit.
I agree. There's definitely a valuable there's something I like about French Canada is that their laws are their laws are in English and French. And so when you're trying to triangulate what was the purpose of this legal like legislation, you have it in two languages, and so you can like triangulate the difference in order to, we meant this, not like slightly to the left over here. When we said humans have rights, we mean like this rather than like, right.
Yeah, like all men are born equal, right? Like what does that mean, men, right?
Right.
Mankind is that
right. Whereas in another language, maybe it was all persons or all humans or all, it just, with the secondary translation, you have to be much more clear with what you mean about the law. Anyway, so we all had these different books, and my grandmother got sick of it and she was like, that's it. And she went out and bought 50 of the same book, like the identical book. Right? So that when one person reads a paragraph, the next person knows like where you're up to and can like read the next paragraph quite easily without an argument about which paragraph was that or repeating a paragraph or like that. So and also if you lose the place, you get right. You reading literally word for word out of the same book. As it was, I was a little kid and I had the more pictographic version with a slightly more kid translation and the adult version that all the other people had. Anyway, as the story goes, my grandmother laid out this big Seder table for like 20 or 30 people, and they put out all the books, and then there was this one relative who I don't want to name exactly because people there know, and then people not there don't need to know. Seemed to, seemingly without being able to see the mind of this person, seemed to refuse to use that book. Would still use their book, be it, I don't know if it was from their family or from their, like, given to them by their grandparents or who knows, but refused to use the same book as us. Now, here I am using two books and following along in the kids book because it's got the pictures and it's way more fun, and still following along in the adults book, so that when it gets to my turn, I will read the paragraph that I need to read rather than the one in like different English version. As was most of the other people at the table were doing this. If they wanted to do two books, you do two books. But this one person refused and only read out of their book, like the other translation book. And like when one person's reading, the whole table goes, other than with kids, the whole table kind of goes quiet and listens to what the one person's rendition of the paragraph. And so here we are, we're going along, and then suddenly, like, record scratch, we're reading a different version of the paragraph. And then this is, if you're talking like family politics, like utter awkward, crazy. And then my grandmother, I think the first time obliviously, like that year, sort of leaned to the person next to her and said something like, my grandmother was very Hungarian. She said something like, where are they eating from? But like loud enough that enough people could hear that it was, where are they eating from? And then like it sort of broke the tension, and everyone like realized it was another book, and we let it go. The person finished the paragraph, we went on, and like whatever, we got over it. And then it happened the next year, and like again the person read the different book, and again my grandmother said, where is she reading from? And then it happened the next year, and then it became a family tradition that like this poor person who felt probably very awkward, and there was something stubborn about why they had to read from their other book, connected to their grandparents or whatever, and never explained. But there was this like snide comment that came around every year. Like, anyway, that's a family tradition. We didn't do it this year because my grandmother passed away and that person wasn't at our table. So, but it was still, from my perspective as a little kid, watching the tradition happen and watching the tradition repeat itself. If we say the phrase when the person the wrong book. Anyway, long family story. But yeah, that's like seeing traditions form and dancing with traditions. There are other traditions. My brother. So one of the parts I mentioned a little moment ago was the four sons: the wise son, the wicked son, the simple son, and the son who's too young to ask. Which I think is kind of a neat thing, because it may be like a developmental model as well. If you look at
there's a lot of stuff there,
yourself at different ages, like not just that you're the dumb son, like Daniel's old enough now, he knows how to ask questions, but at one point he was, and later he was the simple son, and later he was maybe the stubborn, the evil son, and then later he was hopefully the wise son.
And then there's like, there are also different archetypes as well, and then different like ways of responding. So like certain things have certain responses. Like that's a whole thing in and of itself that we can get into.
So in my family, my brother, this is a fascinating thing. This is something I'm still trying to understand. But my brother takes on he never really loved the religion. He was resistant all his life. And so at some point, and like in his character when he was growing up, I don't know how he is now. I don't know if he's better or worse. But when he was growing up, he was a very stubborn character. And so he took on the evil child, the wicked child. And the line is something like, the wicked child says, why would we do this? Why do we do this Seder? Why do you do this? Why do you do this Seder?
Why do you do this thing?
And the next paragraph is, and you should blunt his teeth and tell him that I do this because God took me out of Egypt, and if he was there, he would not have been saved. That's literally what you tell him. And so every year, since my brother started his like stubborn thing, we started getting him to read the like this paragraph. Like, and this year, my brother lives in another country, and we still like called him up to read the paragraph. we had like a Zoom connection, and he was like, my turn, and reads his like paragraph, and then like we continue on with the service. But it's this fascinating family tradition.
Yeah, we had that with my family because there's 5 of us, so I would read. It would be like in order, so I would be like I'm the oldest, so I would do the Chacham, like the wise one, and then my sister would always get stuck with the Rasha,
The evil one.
right? But yeah, it's always like this like who's who, like which one's which.
Yeah, that's so interesting because having you say that, I'm like, oh, this would happen in every family, that you'd argue about which son is which. Like there's not just the story of the sons, there's like who's who and what's what, but it's also like a family archetype. One or some of your children may not like the religion as much as others. Like there's something to contend with that is true and honest about religion and society, that sometimes people don't agree with religion and don't fit in. And naming it, like one thing that naming this the wicked son has done is it's given him a place, even though he wouldn't have had a place, he still has a place.
Yeah, and then like that brings up like then are there really 5 sons, like the one that's not at Seder?
Yeah. Yes. We so the guest at our table mentioned the 5th son. Well, so there's it's something like of 4 sons do our sages talk about, the wise son, the wicked son, the simple son, and the son that's unable to ask. And then there's a tradition of there being a 5th son, the one who didn't show up to the table.
Yeah, there's like all these things because like the way the wording is after that, it's like things. I gotta deal with this. Sorry.
Yeah.
My wife came home in the middle of stream.
This is part of life, you know. Life has children in it. That's kind of
life.
If you didn't learn from the Passover Seder this year, next year you'll have to have it again, and like have your kids in the drama and all the rest. You'll have to learn then. Like kids are part of life.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, this has been a bunch of like, we sort of laid out the original order. We've talked about some of the aspects. I think this is probably, if we want to stop now, this might be a good place to call it time. It's been a pleasure chatting about the Passover. I hope this was informative. It's kind of interesting to compare traditions as well.
Yeah.
Maybe one day we'll have to both end up in next year Jerusalem together, having a Seder together. That'll be fun.
Oh, dude, that would be amazing. Yeah. I would love that.
Come visit, yeah. So I mean, I don't think we've ever said this on the stream, but we've never met in person.
Yeah.
We're just like long distance friends.
Yeah. Yeah, we're Zoom buddies.
So maybe that's a good place to end. Next year in Jerusalem.
Do you want to say goodbye? Here, say goodbye. 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 Oh, now you're shy to speak. Goodbye.
All right.
Goodbye.
All right. Psychotechnologies.